There's new malware identified in the SolarWinds campaign. We'll give you the details.
So, Matt, I hear you have a story about the SolarWinds investigation.
That's right. So Symantec has put out a report identifying a new piece of malware in the ongoing SolarWinds saga. This one is called Raindrop, which is not to be confused with Teardrop, which is another set of malware used by this attacker, but it has some similarities. So we'll go into that. So Raindrop appears to be used for spreading across the victim's network. Apparently, there's no evidence that it's actually delivered directly by the Sunburst malware. And for reference, Sunburst is the malware that was inserted into the SolarWinds supply chain. So the malware that anyone who installed the tainted updates from SolarWinds would have had present on their machine, that is Sunburst. So what we're saying here, or what Symantec is saying here, is that this malware was found on machines, on networks, where at least one other machine was affected by Sunburst, but there's no evidence that it was actually delivered directly by Sunburst. So this is some other part of the attack chain at some later point. To me, my guess would be this malware is delivered after the Sunburst deployment is successful. They establish some sort of other alternate C2 or other path into the network. And then from there, they bring in the Raindrop malware. So this is usually delivered as a DLL file. It's spread to other machines using PowerShell commands. And the Symantec write-up does do a good job of providing specifics. I'm glossing over a lot here. And as usual, when it's a very technical write-up, I recommend you guys go out and read it yourselves to get a full appreciation of what's in there. So the similarities between Teardrop and Raindrop, they both act as loaders for Cobalt Strike beacons. So Cobalt Strike is a very popular penetration testing tool, kind of like your good guy malware, if such a thing exists. Raindrop uses a different custom packer, so you wouldn't be able to deobfuscate it the same way that you would with Teardrop. Raindrop is very interestingly compiled from the 7-zip source code, 7-zip being a very popular tool for expanding different types of archive files, zip files, tar files, those sorts of things. And this is a smokescreen. It doesn't actually use any of the 7-zip functionality, but it is compiled with all that code in there so that it looks very similar to a legitimate 7-zip binary. So it's a way of hiding the purpose of this. So if someone were to find this on the machine, they'd say, it doesn't look exactly like 7-zip, but there's so much 7-zip code in there that it may be some other version. They sort of ignore it, which is clever. It contains an encrypted and compressed version of the malware inside of it that is apparently stored steganographically within the file. So that is, it's not hidden in some sort of contiguous block in the file, from what I understand. There's certain logic that pulls out the bits and pieces of it and then reassembles it and then decompresses it and then decrypts it. And then, because it's shellcode, loads it into memory. So there's no 100% malware file involved here from what I can tell. So that's very interesting. That's a lot of work to go to just hide your malware, which is not surprising given what we understand of the lengths that the SolarWinds attackers went to in the first place. I mean, we know things about Sunburst that are, definitely techniques that an advanced attacker whose primary goal beyond their objective is to not be detected. This doesn't surprise me that they went to this amount of work. So the C2 is interesting. It's either HTTPS or SMB named pipes, which is that's not too far out. I mean, HTTPS is pretty common. SMB named pipes a little less so. The C2 uses name silo as the registrant and common DNS servers. So from what we understand, each of the victims in this case had been given separate IPs and domains for the C2 by those attackers. So, there's no, as far as I know, comprehensive list available of all the domains you have to look out for. But using that information, you might start looking through your own DNS logs for things that stand out, and then you could validate and say, okay, this one looks weird, and the registrant matches, and the DNS servers match. Therefore, I'm going to treat this as potential compromise. Beyond that, Yara rules and IOCs are provided in the semantic write-up.
Wow, that's what I think. I said, first of all, obviously very sophisticated actors who kind of put this together. And but I thought it was amazing reading the article about how they were able to trace the pieces together, right? It was clearly that they were this must have taken an enormous amount of detective work for them to just figure out how they had gotten from step to step through this to figure all of this out. And obviously obviously not your average 16-year-old playing in their basement messing with this thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Really good article.
And kudos to the team that figured all this out as well. Absolutely. I mean, they must have had access to one of the victims who remains unnamed,
Right.
and had the ability to investigate that entire environment to find, strange files and weird behavior. And this is what came out of it. So, I mean, just figuring out how that shell code came out of the 7-zip source code was probably quite an effort in itself. So I think the lesson here, the takeaway at least, is that we're going to be learning details of the SolarWinds campaign for a long time. I mean, it's just going to get more and more involved. We're going to keep learning more and more about it. And new victims will probably be identified. New tactics will be uncovered. The upshot of that is this hasn't gone away yet. So if you thought that you'd gone and run your IOCs when this first this story broke, I would tell you that you're probably going to want to keep the capability to go and look through your logs, keep some of your staff ready to do this, because every time new information comes out, it behooves anybody who was running SolarWinds at that time to go and check for this sort of stuff. So it's going to be more and more of these exercises as the weeks progress. That's my take.
Yeah, I think that's really good recommendations to just kind of keep those logs, make sure that you have ability to do that analysis later on, because it is really clear. And I think the amount of time that this has been uncovered is still, as you said, it's pretty short. And the amount of analysis that is required to kind of come up with this and write this article, there aren't a ton of people who probably have this access, this skill to be able to figure this out. And again, we don't know who all the victims are and how much they've really dug in to find these other variants. So I think it's everybody still needs to kind of be aware of this and look for these little crumbs, so to speak, that lead to something else.